right, you ready, Jay?
Ready when you are.
All right. Welcome to the Real in Real Estate podcast, hosted by me, Lindsay Perino, a realtor in Tampa Bay, Florida. This podcast was created to bring awareness of what real estate agents actually do and some other helpful insights in the industry for the average person. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram and St. Pete Real Estate. Our guest today is Jason Highland. Hey, Jay.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right. So let me tell you about Jay. He was born and raised in New Jersey, so sorry for any foul language ahead of time. He went to Wagner College, played D1 football, and graduated cum laude with a degree in finance and economics. Walking alongside his father's footsteps. You like that? Walking alongside instead of in.
That's fair.
He worked on Wall Street and eventually ended up moving to Florida, like every other Northerner. And he's currently working for one of the world's oldest and largest asset managers. But we can't say the name. He is securities.
Top secret.
Top secret. He's securities license. He has his securities license, right?
Yep.
Has an absurd amount of accreditations and designations, which I wasn't going to put in here because it would take 5 minutes.
Most of the time doesn't mean anything to anybody anyway.
I mean, it does. After your name, the comma means a lot. But you wanted me to say cum laude, so it means something. And he's here chatting with us about a popular topic today that concerns us all in Florida, right, around the world, but mainly Florida because we have a lot of condos here. So he has personal experience. He purchased one in 2014, and he's also going to give us some finance background on condos too. So whatever he can offer.
This could go any number of directions. We're opening Pandora's box.
But I did prep you, so try to stay in line with the questions. No, just kidding.
Even if I write out a script, I tend to stay to that script for about 5 minutes.
And then diverge.
Then it's a free-for-all.
God, so, okay. What was your experience in 2014? I have some data here. The data is awesome. We'll get into it maybe. I know a lot of people don't like talking about numbers because a lot of people don't know the real estate data, what it means, absorption rate, inventory, but it was an entirely different time in 2014. Are you glad you did it?
Yeah, overall, I mean, your first point, it was an incredibly different time. I mean, you compare 2014 through 2020, it was very much so a buyer's market. You had a lot of power, a lot of control. You controlled the narrative of, what inspections were done. There was some negotiation and pricing. Obviously, that went out the window in 2020, 2021.
Half of 2020, right?
So my experience overall was interesting. And I think we checked off all the boxes of what you would want to know when you're buying a condo. I think there's really 5 things that, anybody in your spot would say, look, we need to address this, make sure that we're finding the information that we need when we're buying condo.
Yeah.
The first one is whether or not it's a warrantable condo. And really all that means, and the background on it is that post-2008, there was a bunch of changes. Essentially, all condos, in essence, in Florida are non-Fannie Mae warrantable. That just means you're not going to be able to get traditional financing on those properties. That means 25% down. And that's a bit of a sticker shock for some people. I know for me, coming from New York, New Jersey, not a lot of condos up there. And Florida was really the only state that didn't do away with some of these post-2008 restrictions leading to these non-warrantable condos. So it was new to us. Through this whole process of buying the condo, I used my dad's company. One of the things that they do is mortgages. So later on, we'll probably talk about what you would want or what I want in a real estate agent. Connections like that help. Having someone that can navigate some of these complex situations, it allowed me to close that deal in 45 days. And that's really just scratching the surface. So, we had to come up with the extra money for the down payment. Knowing that going in is important. It's also important to know whether or not there's pending litigation against either the building, the developers, or the HOA. Yeah. We found out within, 2 weeks that there was a lawsuit pending against the developer.
Wait, on your condo that you were buying?
On the condo that I bought, that I had an offer in on, that we just, pieced together 25% down payment. We found out there was pending lawsuit settlement against the developer. And all of that was centered around them cutting corners and building or constructing that complex back in 2005. So that was another issue that we had to overcome. Fortunately,
Well, there's a lot of issues that you have to overcome. First, when you're financing a condo in general with
Yeah.
Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae when you could have, because they both do a lot of background checks. Whenever you're buying anything and you're financing it, you're going to go through, looking at the deed, looking at the title, making sure that the home can actually be sold to you, right? Or the condo in this case. But then condos have even higher, I guess, due diligence that's done on them opposed to single family homes, because there's things like the developer. Developer could be sued. Maybe they cut corners when they were building the condo.
Yeah, that was our big
Or
problem.
the HOA, right? Like what happened with Surfside. Unfortunate to say, but
and that would be one of my final points when going through the list of things that you want to know too. It actually is one of my 5. To that point, though, I mean, you got to rip through the financials of these.
You got to know what you're buying, and obviously the lender wants to know what they're buying.
The lender wants to know, and it's part of the reason why they want to know if there's any litigation pending against the building, the HOA, the developers, because from a bank standpoint, if there's a big settlement that comes down that the HOA has to pay out, all of a sudden they're illiquid. They don't have the solvency to pay what they need to pay to just keep the building standing. And then you're never going to get the loan on that.
Is that what assessments are for? So maybe share with some people too, because we're in the real estate industry, not like one person just buys and sells condos.
Yeah.
Agents do it all, right? Single family homes, condos, townhomes, et cetera. And you got to know a good amount about each to know what to advise your clients on. But as far as the condos go, is that why they hold a certain amount in
so
their HOA fund?
Yeah, your HOA is
in case they get sued? Or
not, potentially. I mean, there should
assessments?
be some type of legal cost reserve. I mean, this could just be, tax planning, these little knick-knack things. There's
Okay.
a million different line items of what they're funding for. A lot of that funding is coming from those monthly HOA dues that you pay
Right.
as an owner.
Which are excruciatingly high right now.
Yeah, and I can rip that apart because that's
Rip it apart.
From 2014 really up until the last year, the experience of owning a condo has been very painless. I lived in it for 6-7 years. I've been renting it out since 2020 when I moved to St. Pete. But now you're running into the downfall of inflation.
Yeah.
The cost of everything has gone up and it's starting to trickle down. So when you're buying a condo, you need to make sure that those reserves, those financials are accurate, that things are being funded, that they're not running a deficit on, collecting those dues. So look at the delinquency rate on what percentage of homeowners or condo owners are not paying those dues, because that's going to catch up over time.
Right.
The more and more people that aren't paying their dues, the less money the association has to fund the projects, the maintenance, the repairs that they need to do. So that's really
Just
important.
like fixing up a house.
Right. It's a budget and they back into that budget. So in accounting, it's called an actuarial calculation. They're basically looking at all these different categories of expenses. It could be as simple as, our management company that we use, how much is it going to cost for them? How much is it going to cost for the security company, the other amenities, pool maintenance, landscaping,
Right.
yada, yada, paint, you name it, electricity. The big one, insurance. So,
Big. It's it was like a 22 or 24% hike in some condos, not everywhere around Florida, but I know specifically where I am, the condo that I'm living in, it was about 22%.
Well,
and I swear they paint the same door every other month. I'm like, do we really need to pay for the door? Well, we can go down that rabbit hole different time, but
initially getting your hands on the financials is important because you can look at it and say, all right, do we have money reserved to pay to whatever capacity what we're going to need to maintain over time? And we certainly don't want to be in negative cash flows, because if you're running into a purchase where they're operating in negative cash flows, more likely than not, you're going to walk into an assessment or a spike in HOA fees.
Yeah. And buyers, by the way, you are allowed to ask for those meeting minutes and to look at some of those financials just as your lender would, so that you know what you're signing up for.
Yeah, you actually.
So make sure, agents, that you do that.
100%. Get the minutes, get the balance sheet of the HOA, get the cash flow statement. You can also get their tax returns from previous years as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you can outright ask, is there an assessment coming?
Yep.
I mean, that's all, you got to check these
Don't
boxes.
rely on the listing agent. Always do your own due diligence.
But the problem that we're running into now, I mean, we talked about inflation, we talked about insurance. Now, for the last year, it's been a bit of a wake-up call for the building that I own. I mean, it was a non-warrantable condo. It did have litigation. Now inflation is catching up. Our insurance on the building went up 40%. They're in the process of replacing the roof, which the cost of materials, the cost of labor has obviously skyrocketed. That project is going to go notably over what they've budgeted for the last, probably 15, 20 years.
What year was your condo built in 2003?
2005.
Oh, right. So 20
But,
years is typically.
in 2005, they're figuring out how much they need to get from every single resident to pay for these projects down the road. But they're using inflation rates more in line with historic averages. Historic inflation rate on average is somewhere around 3%. Inflation peaked out at 9% last year. And in certain pockets of the economy, certain goods, certain services, that was well higher. Certain areas of the country, that was also higher on top of that. So those actuarial calculations in determining how much money they need to collect to pay for the things that they need to maintain and repair, it was skewed on the downside. Right now, they're not taking in enough money to pay for what they need to do based off of the cost of everything.
And honestly, okay, so you have a condo. I live in one currently. If we knew that information ahead of time, I think we'd be a little bit more understanding of, look, they weren't expecting this to happen, right?
Nobody could have expected. Nobody saw inflation hitting 9.5%.
Right.
Almost 9.5%.
Like, and I know this is probably a bad example, but pool maintenance, inflation affects everything. The cost of everything increases. Building materials, roof materials, wood, metal, steel, we've all seen it increase, right?
And when you're looking at a building, I think we have about 300 units in that building.
Okay.
So the one main appeal to a condo is that, you get to move in, it's typically cheaper. You don't have any maintenance you have to do yourself. You're not cutting lawn, you're not cleaning the pool, all that stuff. But that becomes less appealing when the real estate market goes up to the rate that it has. The cost of buying into these properties is higher. And then now, and even in my situation, HOA fees went up 15% this year, and they still are saying that there's an assessment coming this year.
Oh, for your building?
For my building.
Damn, Jay.
And on
honestly,
top of that,
HOA fees right now are like paying rent.
Yeah. I mean, my HOA fee when I first bought it.
In addition to your mortgage, if you took one
it was about $360 in 2014. We're up to almost $500 now a month. I mean, with interest rates gone up, that's not, a nice house. But, when I bought in 2014, that was almost equivalent of a $200,000 house in 2014, just in an HOA fee.
Right. And so I'm glad you even went down that path, because I wanted to talk about why was it so attractive to buy condos back in the day?
I think it really centered around the affordability, the lack of maintenance. They're so common in Florida because it's a snowbird state.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of...
You can leave. You don't have to worry about it. Someone's going to take care of it.
You get packages delivered. Someone will hold on to them.
There's security sometimes.
There's a million different reasons. I think the biggest is just the type of people that Florida attracts.
Yeah.
People that are largely not here all the time. Obviously, since COVID started, that's changed a bit. Florida is one of the biggest benefactors of this, de-urbanization of the population, moving out of these big cities into the more SAT word
for the win.
People are moving out of these big cities after COVID, certainly during COVID, and they're moving to states that are cheaper, lower cost of living.
Yeah.
That includes real estate. Insurance down here is definitely not cheaper, but net still cheaper to live here. And then low taxes. I mean, that's a big thing. And that's always going to benefit Florida.
Yeah.
So, I think that was the appeal. But, now it's gotten to the point where buildings are older, post-Surfside collapse, regulations and laws, ordinances have changed. By 2025, all HOAs have to have enough money to fund basically a replacement or repair of everything in the building at any point in time.
And they have to have the, what's the inspection? The framework, framework inspection.
The engineering inspection.
How was that even being skipped? Do you know? Did you read into that?
I didn't.
Because I know other condos have also skipped the framework and
yeah,
engineering checks?
So the lawsuit that was pending against my building when I bought it was based off of the developer cutting corners. So I actually had a conversation with my dad a couple of weeks ago about this when I got news of a pending assessment coming because the roof is going to run over
How
cost.
much was it?
They don't know yet. So, I'm sitting there trying to run Excel spreadsheets, figure out, what
square footage of the roof.
Yeah,
how much are materials?
No, but to the financials point, I always say get them initially when you're buying, get them annually. They send them out annually anyway, and look at them because I've kind of petitioned through the years in looking at the line items of their expenses and saying, well, why are we paying our building manager 40% more this year? Why are we paying the security company 35% more this year? And, you get enough residents behind you, you can control, kind of the overhead cost of what's happening.
Right.
Be your own advocate.
Are you on the board?
No.
That's a different story. HOA boards.
Nobody wants me on an HOA board. So, when you look at that annually, you can go line item by line item. They have to tell you where they're spending their money.
Right.
So you can see, pick and choose, and then start to ask questions. Start to advocate for your best interest, for the other homeowner's best interest, and find ways to help them cut the costs and where they're really seeing the big overhead increase. Right now, obviously, it's hard to do that with insurance, with the Florida insurance market just being an absolute mess. So this process only goes so far, but you do have control over it, and you can't just really turn a blind eye to it. Certainly not up front, because you need to know that they have enough money to pay what they need to pay to avoid higher fees and walking into an assessment, but year by year, it's also very helpful.
Yeah. I think, seeing everything that's coming out right now, and we talked about the reasons why it would be appealing to buy a condo back in the day. So many, like our parents, people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, thought about buying a condo because a single family home has so much maintenance, right?
Yeah.
But now I feel like there's a little bit of a shift and we can advise differently, right, on snowbirds who want to retire down here or, not necessarily be a snowbird the full-time retirement.
Right.
And maybe advise that a single-family home would be in their best interest. It's a little bit more to put out. Single-family homes values are up still so much from last year, about 11%. It's toggling between. But would you say that's maybe a better investment? And
it depends. I think it needs to be a part of the conversation, and you just need to really do the math and figure out, okay, here's option A, here's option B. Whether, option A is a townhome or a condo, and option B is a, individual residence. Do the math. Figure out, what's your purchase price? What's your interest rate? What are your fees? What's the projection on those fees going up? Even if you were to go into it with the knowledge or being told that fees aren't, your monthly HOA fees aren't going up, do the math and say, all right, let's say this is going to go up 5% a year for the next 5-10 years. What does this look like down the road from an affordability standpoint? And then, do the same thing on an individual house with, here's my principal, interest, taxes, my mortgage payment. Then, we all know taxes are going up as well. I mean, taxes on my condo went up 300% this past year. So
you're not being dramatic.
No, literally they tripled.
Okay.
By
the way, I'm not going to do all that work at all. I'm not going to be in a spreadsheet doing that. I'm going to be like, hey, Jay, favor. Or you can go to Jay, by the way.
Well, that's the great thing about having a real estate agent with connections. They can go to the right people, find you a lender. They can find you someone that can run some quick math for you. They can, find or have a relationship with an insurance agency to help make that transition a little bit easier. But, for me, it's all about letting the numbers speak the truth. You can't fudge the numbers. A lot of people look at Zillow, for example, and they say, all right, Zillow's estimated my mortgage payment is going to be X. Here's my, principal and interest. Here's my taxes. Here's my insurance, et cetera. That's not always the truth, because Zillow doesn't always accurately represent the fact that when you resell that property or you purchase it, that tax base is going to reset.
Right.
You're not paying the same property tax that the previous owner paid.
Yep.
You're paying a property tax off the purchase price that you're buying it for. So that's obviously going to be higher.
Right. And it can be so much higher. And this is what your agent's supposed to do the due diligence on. Look into it for you. It's PCPAO here in Pinellas, pcpao.gov. Twitty is his last name. Is it Mike or Mark Twitty? Matt. maybe Matt Twitty.
Some guy Twitty.
Some guy Twitty. They have a really cool calculator where you can go ahead and say, hey, I'm going to purchase for $599,000, and whether you're going to homestead your property or not. And they'll actually give you an estimate of what the property taxes will be. Because sometimes when you're looking at that data, somebody was grandfathered into a tax rate from 20 years ago. Yeah. Maybe they own the property for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. So your taxes will be astonishingly different. Yep. So don't always go based off Zillow.
The state can only increase your tax rate by a max of 3% per year, I believe is the number. And on top of that, if you're a snowbird and you don't have this property.
That's for homestead, right?
That's just in general.
Or that's just in general.
So homestead, if it's not your primary residence, you don't get that homestead exemption, which
is like $50,000 to.
It's a $50,000 drop in your taxable value for the first $100,000, and then the second $100,000, I believe, is $25,000. So if you buy a $500,000 house, the first $100,000 of value is dropped by 50. The second $100,000 is dropped by 25.
So layman's terms, like if you buy a house for $150,000, you have homestead, you'll actually be paying taxes on the $100,000, not $150,000, in a sense.
Yeah, it's reducing the taxable value.
Yeah.
But if it's not your primary residence, you don't get that homestead tax exemption.
Right.
So you're going to pay it on the market value. On top of that, if you buy the property through an entity, like a trust or an LLC, as an investment property, whatever the structure is.
Like Maverick Enterprises.
Very similar in theory. You also don't get homestead exemption.
Yeah.
The state does not offer homestead exemptions to entities. These are a million. I mean, like I said, you can go down a rabbit hole. There's a million different.
Wait, entities as an LLC? Sorry, I glazed over that for a second.
An LLC is considered an entity. It's a legal entity.
So no homestead exemption.
You don't get homestead exemption purchasing a property through an entity. It's no
I want to go down a whole rabbit hole of what's the benefit, but we'll. He's like, Lindsay, I have things to do today.
That could be tax management. That could be podcast number 5.
Episode,
yeah.
So this is 4. So you want to come on again? Like, I don't know, Jay.
Maybe
some
15.
time.
I need a bit of a break. Yeah. But the point is that there's a myriad of different combination of circumstances that you need to consider. And I think all of it at this point really leans to things like condos costing more.
Yeah.
Than
more than expected. Right.
More and as a result becoming potentially less appealing.
Right. So he gave us the financial answer.
Every situation is different.
He gave us the every situation is different answer.
It
depends.
You really need to go and account for the facts.
Yeah.
Because your facts are different than my facts.
Right.
And see what combination of circumstances makes sense for you.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say about my experience with buying the condo is you need, and I would say this is the case in any real estate purchase, but especially with condos, you need to get a seller's disclosure.
Always happens.
If you can be in a situation where you're buying properties without relinquishing your rights to an inspection, to an appraisal, to the seller's disclosure, a misrepresentation of facts on a seller's disclosure is illegal and it's a breach of contract. And I ran into this when I purchased my condo in 2014. There was electrical issues, there was plumbing issues. Neither of the 2 showers actually had hot water and the water pressure kind of trickled out. And they were like, well, sorry, that's your problem.
Do you know what contract you used? Was it standard or as is?
It was as is.
So that's the worst part of best part of an as is, right? Best part for seller, worst part for a buyer is because an as is contract, you're
accepting it as is. I get
right.
it. But,
and they can say on the seller's disclosure, the seller can say by no fault of their own, I'm not sure. It's my best guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But
even flippers,
when contacting them and your average real estate agent, they tend to show their cards. And in this case, they knew about all this stuff well in advance. They didn't disclose it on the seller's disclosure. And they initially refused to repair everything to bring it to normal, proper working condition.
Did you do an inspection?
Yeah.
Of course you did. That's how you found out about it.
That's how we found all this stuff.
Okay.
So I basically had an attorney draft a letter that says, look, unless you bring these issues.
Jason's got balls.
Unless you bring these issues to normal, proper working conditions, look, it's a breach of contract. And we'll, if nothing else, cancel the contract, take our money back out of escrow, be done
Did
with
they get
you.
scared? Did they do it?
Yeah, they immediately called an electrician and a plumber, and we fixed it.
Oh, wow.
But again, you
Hey,
compare
everyone.
you compare that you compare that
You want to hire a lawyer?
you compare that to what we've experienced over the
Yeah.
last 3 years. People have just been trying to lock in the houses while they can, and they've been giving up
Yeah, they're
every
flying
single
off the
right.
shelves.
Right. I mean, it's slowed down a bit, but for much of the last 3 years, people are like, I don't need an inspection. I don't need an appraisal. I'll buy cash, whatever. I just want the house.
Yeah. And they're not flying off the shelves now. I mean, our inventory is half of what it was.
Yeah, I think
last year.
I think the normal running average is you have about 4 months, 3-4 months of inventory on the market.
So they say it's 5 to 6. You'll hear like
well,
real
I'm not a real
estate.
estate agent, so
I know. My data. Stay in your lane, Jay.
my bad.
But they say anywhere from 5.5 to 6.5 or 5 to 6. Well, when I've been looking at the data over the last few years in Florida, Pinellas County specifically, we really haven't had higher than 3 months worth of inventory over the last few years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a conversation I want to have in the future, but the new normal, right? Because we're in a different age, what used to be normal, 5 to 6 months worth, isn't so normal in Tampa Bay. It's a hot market. And unless, we have a really big shift, something happens in the financial sector, we're not going to see that much inventory, I don't think, for a while.
Yeah. And
Even with the worst interest rates we had, inventory is still just approaching 3. I have it right here. Current inventory is 2.9 months worth. 1 year ago it was 0.7. And in Hillsborough, it's 2 months worth of inventory. A year ago it was 0.5. So it's just never gonna, I don't think it's gonna be that high.
I don't see it changing much. I mean, you got to think. People ask me all the time, like, you work in finance, should I go buy another house? Should I go buy a rental property or whatever?
And you refer them to an agent, right?
Well, I ask them questions first.
Me, Jay.
Yes. We'll have to collect a stack of business cards. But more often than not, these people are coming to me and they're like, okay, I want to buy a rental property. I don't want to put down money on it. Or I don't have the money. How do I get this rental property with as little as possible? Then the next question is it a good time to buy? I want to wait for prices to come down. And at this point, I really don't see prices going down much more than they really have. I mean, what we saw from a price appreciation standpoint for much of COVID was driven by that de-urbanization, that rapid uptick in demand for property. Get it while you can.
Right.
Real estate is a
Simple
finite
supply
resource.
and demand.
Right. It's macroeconomics 101.
Yeah.
The less of a supply of something there is, the more willing
demand
people are to pay for something.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's this law of diminishing returns. Supply and demand is a bell curve. So prices do get to a point where people in aggregate don't want to pay that. You can look at it with real estate, the combination of appreciation, the increase in interest rates. Real estate over the last year has gotten to a point where it's not as affordable. So the demand for real estate dropped, causing prices to come down. You've seen it with new cars, used cars. That new equilibrium is reached when demand comes down. In order to spur demand again, prices have to come down to meet that demand.
Honestly, I wanted to have this conversation too. It's like we're in a game of Sims. You ever played that game?
Yeah.
The Fed is literally.
I always
is
lit the house on fire.
The players. Of course you did.
Yeah, the pyro in me.
Yeah.
But I mean, you got to think real estate, again, it's a finite resource. Our population is increasing. People are leaving other major metro areas for
They're
Florida.
coming here. They did in
whether
2020.
It's tax efficient, you name it. So all of those factors stand behind the fact that arguably real estate has seen the correction that it's going to see. You've seen the new home sales of houses that aren't even built yet, but there's contracts to sell them. All those have ticked up in the last month or so as interest rates came down a little bit. So there is that constant intrinsic demand because it seems like the world accepts the fact that real estate is a finite resource. There's only so much of it. Get it while you can. And if there's a little bit of a glimpse of better affordability, strike while the iron's hot type thing.
Yeah.
And I don't see that changing. And people
Well,
ask
it
me,
has fluctuations. Like
it all ebbs and flows. Everything is mean reverting, but you look at now relative to 2008, and that seems to be what everybody is really waiting for.
Yeah.
They're waiting for the next 2008 real estate market. Real estate in 2008 was a completely different animal. I mean, you can go down to the subprime mortgages.
The big event, right? What were we doing?
The
Giving
stated
away
income loans, the easy money. You know, you could go into a bank, say you made $2 million, and walk out with a loan for a $5 million house in theory.
When you couldn't even afford it.
When you made minimum wage flipping burgers at McDonald's.
Right. What did they call them? Plus AA.
Well, all loans are
Well, they
rated.
called them in 2008 like something.
They were no doc, stated income, subprime loans.
Subprime loans.
Yeah.
Okay. Subprime
And
loans.
you know that can go down a whole nother rabbit hole of, you know, let's break apart what went wrong in 2008. But the reality is back then too, leading up to 2008, a lot of banks were issuing floating rate or adjustable rate mortgages. So those mortgages.
Explain those real quick. So just in layman's term.
Adjustable rate mortgages, you get in at a low, essentially a teaser rate.
Okay.
And those interest rates, so the interest you pay on your mortgage resets to coincided market interest rates.
When? In a year?
Most of them
2 years?
monthly.
Oh, it's monthly.
Yeah. 30-day adjustable rate mortgages.
Okay.
So if you look at the last 12 months, if you bought an adjustable rate mortgage in 2022 in say March, you probably would have got in around 3.5%, obviously depending upon your credit score.
Which is good, but now you'd be at
But that would have gone up to
6, 7.
6, 7, whatever it is. Yeah.
So over the course of 30 years, like that's why when people ask you is a good time to buy. Over the course of 30 years, at least this is what I say while I try to stay in my real estate lane. When people ask me about different rates or the lending side of things, over the course of 30 years, and at the rate in which single family homes or any property in Florida appreciates, you're going to come out on top.
At
Would
the
you
end of the
agree?
day,
Would you
I
disagree?
summarize it as date the rate, marry the house.
That's what every lender's. Are you a lender?
No. I know a couple.
Do you know how many times I've heard that?
You can always refinance. And I didn't know
Yes.
that was that well known. Now I feel a little bashful that I shared a cliche because
You did.
I'm only cliche on rare occasions. But you could always refinance. Find
Yeah.
the house that you want. Rates go up and down all the time. You can always refinance to a low rate.
And would you agree Tampa Bay is a great market
I think it is.
for doing
So
so?
my point with the adjustable rate mortgage conversation, as those rates reset, as interest rates were going up in the 2005 to 2007, early 2008 timeframe, people were literally underwater. They couldn't afford to pay their mortgage, principal, interest, mortgage, all that. So there was a forced selling. People had to walk away from their homes. You had this flood of inventory, and it, in the simplest terms, caused everything to just capitulate on the downside.
Defaults, right?
Yeah. Now you look at the composition of mortgages, the vast majority of mortgages out there are fixed rate mortgages. They're the percentage of adjustable or floating rate mortgages is down, I believe, below 15% of all mortgages. That was almost 50% in 2008.
Boom.
So
Holy
yeah,
crap.
the mortgage market, the homeowners are less interest rate sensitive now because they've taken advantage of the last decade of low interest rates to refinance to that fixed rate.
Right.
That's what you can do down the road where, right now, even though we've come down from a, north of 7.25% average mortgage rate in the US, I think we're down somewhere around 6.5 right now after the last few weeks. You could, in theory, just go refinance right now. I wouldn't recommend
It's all
it.
about the monthly payment.
Yeah.
Honestly, when it comes down to it. What can you afford to put down? If you can't, work with somebody to do so, right? There's a bunch of grants in the area for first-time home buyers. There's so many different programs to help. Work with a financial advisor to help someone like Jay. But then also understand, like he said it, lenders say it all the time, right? Like you're really looking at the rate, but it's not something that you're going to be stuck with. You have a way to get out of it. You have a way to refinance, but it's about your monthly payment. Can you afford that? Is it good? Don't miss out on the house, right? Inventory is a little bit low right now. So as it starts to creep back up, you're going to have more options, but you want to take advantage of something right now. So
Yeah. And as there is a finite resource like real estate, I mean, like anything else, you can talk about gold, diamonds. They're so valuable because they're rare, hard to find, and there's only so much of it out there. Real estate's no different. So I think that, especially in Florida, with that intrinsic demand, with the finite resource and the growing population, I really don't see any of these factors leading to a big drop in the market down here.
Yeah. You heard it from Jay. All right, last question I have for you. I'm curious. So real estate agents, sometimes people know us for doing so many tasks, more than we should, right? In Florida, we're a transaction broker. We help you get from point A to point B in the transaction. We try not to focus on the fiduciary stance so much from the financial obligation. We're really there to help consult, advise, work with 5 to 7 to 10 parties at a time, right? Like we manage that for you. So with that being said, what are some important characteristics that listeners should look for in their real estate agent? I know you've worked with one in the past, but
yeah, I've worked with a few.
What do you want to make sure that listeners know they should?
For me, I think doing things like you're doing is helpful. Educating people on what they need to be looking for, because you don't know what you don't know ultimately. If you've never gone through the process before, you've never bought a condo or a single family home, you don't really know what to look for.
Right.
So having a real estate agent, whether or not they have, 15, 20 years in the business to know what to look for, having them backed by some type of support organization that can help educate them. And if they don't know the answer, they know where to find the answer. Those things are important. So having someone that can guide your thought process and help educate you, make sure you're not missing something, is important. I want someone to be an advocate for me. I'm a bit unique of a situation. I'm probably
He's a unique individual.
I'm a bit of a pain to work with when it comes to real estate, and any of my previous real estate agents can probably attest to that, because I read contracts.
Did you hear he said agents, plural?
Yeah, I don't know if any of the past ones would be future ones, and not by my choice, probably by their choice.
God.
But, I read contracts. I do math. I figure out, okay, the bank is telling me that my payment is going to be X, Y, Z. Why is it going to be X, Y, Z? I back into the math, try and make sure that, there's no types of hidden fees.
But you have that experience from the finance side, so you don't try to put yourself in a different pair of shoes. You wouldn't expect an agent to do all of that math
but
for their
I
clients,
want someone
right?
that is going to be able to handle me, and the fact that I'm not just going to take something as is.
Right.
I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to make sure that the facts align.
Yep.
I want someone that's going to be in the understanding that if something's wrong,
they're going to hire a lawyer,
and the other party isn't holding up to their end of the contract, that there are going to be ramifications or delays in that.
They should, as all agents should.
I think the big thing for me, though, that would make me go back to any of my really one of my previous real estate agents, is that the relationship doesn't necessarily end at the closing date.
Right.
My last real estate agent, she, sent a follow-up multiple times throughout that first year. Hey, make sure you file for your homestead exemption. If I had questions about getting an architect or a contractor, she had contacts. She helped me get initial insurance on the property. She was dealing directly with my lender on a couple different issues throughout the closing period. So all those things, you don't have to be a real estate wizard. That's more the relationship and being a person to another person. Going above and beyond just saying, all right, here's a house. I'll show it to you. I'll put in the paperwork for you. Thanks. Good luck on your new house.
Right.
Most real estate agents, I would say, don't go to that next level. They don't do all the follow-ups. It's becoming more common, I think. But having someone that will be able to get the information you need to make an informed and educated decision, and then make sure you're checking off all the boxes even a year later, to me, that's good business.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Jay, thank you so much for coming. I know you have a lot to do, so I appreciate you stopping by.
I got more bourbon
You
to drink.
need a refill.
No, thanks for having me. My first podcast, so hopefully...
You sucked. Just kidding.
Well,
Just kidding.
We'll see what we look like on
Martin,
camera.
edit that out.
I don't have a camera for Hollywood, or a face for the camera of Hollywood, and I don't have a voice for radio.
No, you don't have a camera. No camera.
I definitely don't have a camera. No, but I appreciate the opportunity. It's been fun. Hopefully we get to do it again.
Yeah. And are we able to put any of your contact information
No.
in the show? Oh, okay.
No.
All right. Well, this is just a one-sided deal for me only. Thanks so much for your time.
It is one-sided, but happy to offer guidance and advice based
It
off
wasn't
of,
one-sided. I actually gave you alcohol.
well, that is true.
That's
But
true.
I can offer guidance and advice based off of my own personal opinions and my own personal research.
That aren't associated
What
with
I
his
can't
employer.
do is position my employer's thoughts,
Yeah.
products, services, any of that as a type of investment advice, or, you know, I can't share their views as my own views, essentially. So as a person to another person, happy to,
There's your
talk through
disclaimer,
things. Yes.
legal disclaimer.
Yeah, that's the asterisk
And-
and the italics at the bottom of the email.
Asterisk,
Past
asterisk,
performance
asterisk.
does not guarantee future results. All that fun stuff.
So if you try to come sue us, there was a legal disclaimer on a
Box checked.
podcast. Thanks so much, Jay.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Bye.